Following threats of financial consequences from the Trump administration, Governor Scott disputed allegations this week that Vermont is a sanctuary state. Plus, BTV officials consider their options amid public outcry over ICE's use of the airport. And an American ultramarathon runner sets a new long trail record. All that and more ahead on Vermont This Week.
From the Vermont Public Studio in Winooski, this is Vermont This Week. Made possible in part by the Lintelak Foundation and Milne Travel. Here's moderator Mitch Wertlieb.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. It's Friday, August 22nd, and with us on the panel today, we have Elodie Reed from Vermont Public, Auditi Guha from VTDigger, and Aaron Calvin from the Stowe Reporter, News and Citizen. Thank you all so much for being here today. Audie, I want to start with you. We're going to start with this story talking about Governor Phil Scott. He has been having to deal a lot lately with the Trump administration, probably more than he would like to. He recently refused to send Vermont National Guard soldiers down to Washington, D.C. as part of that federal takeover of the police department there. But this issue with Vermont being called a sanctuary state, the Attorney General Pam Bondi said that Vermont is illegally harboring people, et cetera. And he said, no, that is not the case. But give us some background here, because at first there were a list of municipalities in Vermont. Now it's the whole state. What's going on?
Yeah, so it goes back to this first list that was published in May, actually by the Department of Justice at that time, which had 100 different communities across the country named as sanctuary jurisdictions, which basically means that they have policies in place that are not cooperating with federal immigration authorities. And that first list got a lot of pushback because many communities said they were mistakenly there were misspellings, and that list actually comprised of both blue and red states. So after that list, they suddenly came up with a new list last week of 35 jurisdictions across the US, and once again, Vermont is on that list. The first time they named Vermont on the list, Phil Scott and others pushed back saying that this is not true. We do not have any rules on our books that prohibit, dealing with federal immigration authorities at any level. And this new list that came, I believe the governor received it on Monday. He responded immediately on Tuesday, strongly saying that he feels Vermont is on that list as an error, because once again, Vermont has never been a sanctuary state and doesn't call itself one.
And there are potential consequences here because the Attorney General is saying that there could be financial penalties against Vermont. What is she talking about?
Absolutely. I mean, Trump has already sued New York City for being a sanctuary state. So the U.S. Attorney General said clearly that for communities that have been named and that do not reverse these policies that they believe are in effect, they will face civil or criminal action, and it may affect the federal dollars that they get.
You know, it's just so interesting because I know that Governor Phil Scott would prefer not to be dealing with these issues over and over again. He has actually said publicly that we can't react to every single thing that comes out of the Trump administration, but something like this just can't be ignored.
Exactly, and it's seen as a part of the Trump administration's greater effort to sort of crack down on immigration. Okay.
Speaking of immigration, Elodie Reed, you had a really fascinating article on Vermont Public about what's happening at the Burlington International Airport. Apparently, at least 100 protesters went to the airport, wanted to talk to airport officials to say, please stop cooperating with ICE. What was happening there?
Yeah, so this was at this month's monthly commission meeting at the airport. Those are the officials who oversee policy at the airport. And folks were there after VTDigger has done a lot of really good reporting about these activists who have been at the airport very early in the morning, making videos of people they say are ICE officials, moving people who are detained through the airport out of the state. And some of those videos show a white van with folks that the activists say are ICE officials moving people through a non-public side door, at 3:30 in the morning. Another story that VTDigger did where activists said they walked up to the ticket counter with people they said were ICE officers and 3 women they had detained, and that during that conversation at the ticket counter, the women who were detained were crying, obviously didn't want to get on a plane, and were turned around. The airline has, according to Digger's reporting, has a different version of that story about why they got turned around. Activists say the person at the counter didn't want to let people on the plane who didn't want to fly. Airline says that's not what happened. ICE didn't comment. But all of that sort of context is what led up to this big public presence at this public meeting. And what the concern that people are expressing is that it seems like people detained by ICE are being moved in the dead of night without access to legal representation through non-public areas, and they're asking airport officials to not let that happen.
What did the airport officials say about what their role is, what they feel they can or cannot do?
Yeah, so the airport director, Nick Longo, thanked all of the people. There's almost 3 hours of testimony or public comment from members of the public that night, and he thanked everyone for sharing their thoughts, that it was important for airport officials to hear that. He said that he's working with Burlington Mayor Emma Mulvaney-Stanek on the idea that's been pitched by activists to have some sort of screening, where if someone's being moved through the airport in the custody of federal immigration authorities, they at least have the chance to access some sort of legal counsel. Nick Longo, the airport director, did point out that they do have legal obligations to federal authorities. They can't block anyone from moving from through the public space in the airport. That being said, he also did reach out to a law firm to ask what are their legal obligations, and they do have some latitude. If they make a policy that says no one can use non-public doors, no one can park in certain areas, they can enforce that. So those are some of the things that he suggested the airport was looking into. You
noted in your article too, there were signs that the activists had put up, which I thought was pretty clever, saying, "We see something, we say something."
Yeah.
A play on those signs that say, if you see something, say something. And they're saying, well, we're seeing something that's not right here. I mean, we're talking about things like due process here, right? Because if they're taking people using a side door, it seems like they're trying to do something surreptitiously here.
Yeah, I mean, and there is data showing that there's a data source called the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse. It's known as TRAC. It's out of Syracuse University. They've measured how many people who have had legal representation who have been in the custody of immigration authorities, or have had immigration cases through court. And in Vermont, people who have Vermont addresses between January and June of this year, only 43% of those people have had legal representation. And so there is data backing up this concern that people are being pushed through this system without any recourse, which they have a right to.
Really appreciate the update on that one. And Aaron Calvin, we're seeing that Vermonters are getting involved in all sorts of ways here. You were writing about municipalities, including Cambridge, where the Select Board recently passed a resolution that was basically backing up free speech rights, due process. What can you tell us about what happened at that meeting?
Sure. Well, Cambridge and Johnson are just 2 towns in Vermont that are the latest in many towns, as I understand it, across the state that have been asked by residents to look at making these types of resolutions, which I believe started with Rutland City. And I think people are looking around and they're seeing these sort of extrajudicial arrests and seeing people, members of their community, taken away by masked figures, put on flights down to Louisiana and other places. And they're thinking, well, if the federal government is, behind these sorts of things and the state government doesn't seem to be, taking the kind of steps that I would like them to, maybe I can get my local community leaders to, stand up and say, this isn't right. We believe in this town in free speech, the right to free speech, and the right to due process. And It's interesting the results that it's had. In Johnson, they just had a brief discussion about it, and even members of the select board that said, hey, I believe in this, but I don't think it's our role here to say or do anything about this. And in Cambridge, they had a much more drawn out, several meetings worth of conversations before they finally, on a 3-2 vote, approved it. And the conversation there was more about, do we want to say that we want to uphold the entire Constitution? What's wrong with that? And others who said, no, we need to specifically affirm these portions of the Bill of Rights because these are the parts that are being violated. And even though it hasn't happened in our community yet, we want people who are at risk to be taken off the streets by ICE to know that we support them, even if these resolutions have no real legal meaning.
That's what I was going to get to also. I mean, they are largely symbolic, but important to the people that wanted the select board to take this up, right? To say that this is on our books now. Right.
The resident who brought it forward in Cambridge, when the discussion turned to why are we doing this, he basically said, it's an opportunity for community leadership.
So yes, in Cambridge, yes, in Rutland City, you had mentioned, but Johnson did not pass such a resolution.
Johnson did not consider it very much, no.
Okay. Auditi, Guha, I want to turn to you. An incredible article I thought that you wrote about in VTDigger, and it's because it's been 4 years now since the United States pulled out of Afghanistan, America's longest running war. You were writing about a lot of the Afghan refugees who were able to get here to Vermont, who have been resettled. But a lot of these folks were interpreters, they were colleagues with the U.S. Soldiers who were fighting in Afghanistan. They put their lives on the line. They were made some promises, right, about family members that they said, we will get safe haven for you. What's happening now?
So Vermont has rehomed about 650 Afghans across the state. And many of them, 4 years after this war ended, are still waiting to be reunited with their families. And they don't know if they'll ever see them again. In some cases, they don't even know if their families are okay, because in a country that was taken over by the Taliban, the Afghans who helped the US troops on the ground were considered traitors. So any of them who are being sent back or face deportation will probably not survive there.
And the Trump administration is not making it easy for these family members to come over, right?
They really haven't, and there's been multiple attacks on the refugee resettlement program over the last few months, from funding being cut off. The Afghan Alliance has lost almost all its funding and doesn't know if it will be able to stay alive, basically. And meanwhile, when organizations like this go away, these new residents of Vermont will not have resources to turn to, on top of their funding being taken away. And Phil Scott actually made a comment on recently. He sent out a press release basically saying that Vermont's need to celebrate the contributions of these new residents we have in our state. And I'm quoting him, and he said, we need to ensure those who seek peace, freedom, and the rule of law that our state can provide are always welcome in America.
Now, it's interesting, too, because a lot of these folks we're talking about, some of them were told they have to leave Afghanistan, go somewhere else. It's not an immigration story like, Elodie, you've reported on a lot, where folks are willingly coming here.
Absolutely.
They were told, you got to get out because your lives are in danger, but now they're stranded.
Yeah, so this is a very different sort of immigration than the one we are used to, where people come to America, looking for the American dream. In this case, they didn't have a choice. Their country was destroyed practically. If they stayed, they would lose their lives because the Taliban doesn't consider them friends. And they came on a pathway that was promised to them. America said that we will take care of the people who helped us, and you're welcome here. And this year, there seems to have been a complete reversal of that promise, because it's slowed the process down. The process for people to come here from Afghanistan has been greatly slowed down and is really impacting people on the ground here and back in Afghanistan.
One of the most striking things I found in your article was you quoted one veteran who fought in Afghanistan, U.S. soldier, who said, if not for the interpreters and the colleagues that we had over there, I would not be here today.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Yes, Nathan Fry, he's a Vermont resident. He served in Afghanistan, and he said he met dozens of people on the ground who became friends. And he basically said that, these are people who believe in and still want to live in a free and democratic society. And that dream is also being taken away from them.
I urge everyone to read that story in VTDigger, and thank you for writing it. I want to move on to, because it is summer, we always have to talk about flooding. And Elodie, you had recently a really fascinating story about an historic property in Montpelier, Vermont's capital city, which is being turned into a floodplain. But what's the historic part of this? It's so interesting.
Yeah. So it's the property that was, that belonged, well, it was the property that was settled by Jacob Davis, who's considered the founding settler of Montpelier. And it doesn't, so it has a house on it. It's not his house. According to the history I was reading, it's the house that was built after his family sold the property. But essentially, it's kind of where agricultural Montpelier started. And this house that was built in the 1830s has seen the city build up around it. There's histories of, a cement plant going up, the railroad goes through it, Route 2 goes by it with all its traffic and business. And that house now is, all that's left is a chimney. A chimney and a floor and some of the barn. It's being deconstructed in order to restore the floodplain that it sits on, because it's right in this area. It's kind of like an island between Route 2, the railroad, and the Winooski River. And the idea is, without the house, you then lower the ground, and that makes way for more water, and hopefully keeps it from rushing downstream quite as much towards
It's
downtown.
such a full circle kind of story. It's reverting to its natural state, and yet it's also tied up with this all settling of Montpelier.
Yeah.
Really fascinating.
It is, and it's in this area. So I called up someone from UVM. Her name's Rebecca Deal. She studies river systems there as a faculty member, and she was explaining that in the Winooski watershed in particular, which is so steep and so developed, it is kind of like one of the only opportunities to restore a floodplain in that area. And so she was just saying what an amazing opportunity it is. It was funded through the sort of ARPA funds that the state got during COVID, and it was put into this Flood Resilient Communities Fund. And so that's what's helping pay for the deconstruction of the house. It was vacant for a while, so they had to pay off a mortgage. And there's also a second part of the project, the removing the soil to lower the ground, that's being reviewed by FEMA. So there's a little bit of the project to go, but yeah, folks, it's by the Agway on Route 2, about 2 miles east of Montpelier. If you wander back there, you'll see people carefully taking apart the house, and those materials will be reused and resold to go into something else.
Great coalition of people that got together and helped make all this happen. When do you think it'll all be done, or have they said? Or
I mean, I was there the first week in August, and the house was still up. It didn't have a roof. It's now pretty much gone.
Wow.
So I imagine they'll be done pretty soon. And no word on when the FEMA review will be done. So that's kind of a wait and see.
Well, we're all waiting on a lot of things from FEMA, that's for sure.
Don't hold your breath.
Yeah, exactly. Aaron, let's talk some more about, another town that has experienced a tremendous amount of flooding in the last couple of years is Johnson. We've talked about this on the show. 2 years after the flooding there, what's sort of the update on how the town is doing?
Well, so we've had some really positive stories. Basically, Johnson is in the process of there was a whole initiative last year called Reimagine Johnson. They're in the process of literally trying to reimagine themselves in a post-flood future, and many are trying to hold on to the vision of a positive post-flood future, despite the many challenges. So you've had the high-profile moving of the historic library to higher ground. That was a great positive story.
Incredible story, by the way. We had some video of that on the show one time.
Right.
Actually seeing this huge library being moved inch by inch down the street is fascinating.
But, on the personal level, there are still 17 properties, including the former grocery store, that are waiting on a FEMA buyout.
Sterling Market.
Sterling Market, and they're going through a sort of different FEMA channel than the residential properties. So it's really unclear how long that's going to take. From the outset, everyone was told, and anyone that has been through the buyout process could tell you, it's going to take a long time, and you're still, paying basically for the house and paying expenses on the house while you're waiting for it. And there's been very little movement on those sorts of projects, from what I've been told. And these aren't just buildings. These are, in many cases, some people were lucky enough to find housing elsewhere, to get support elsewhere. But the fact is that many of these structures were damaged in the flooding because they were built in the floodplain, because they were housing accessible to low-income people, to people who don't have a lot of other housing alternatives. There's one woman whose house was absolutely destroyed in the flood. She bounced around for 2 years, basically, since the flood, to different kinds of emergency housing. Now she's back in that house because she has nowhere else to go. And that house is not a safe place to live, but she's essentially out of alternatives.
And briefly, Aaron, what about the wastewater treatment plant in Johnson? Because I know that was a serious issue.
That's interesting too, because there's been a little movement on that. The Johnson Village manager has expressed a great deal of frustration to me in some very colorful language, that, every time they try to meet the FEMA benchmark, it changes. It's, even before the Trump administration's cuts and changes of leadership to FEMA, the process was well known for its Kafkaesque bureaucracy. So that's
the worst kind of bureaucracy, Aaron.
It's the worst kind, well known.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Thank you very much for that update. I want to get back to some issues around things that people are doing in an activist way. Audie, you've been writing about People's Kitchen. This is a free food service now that is sort of popped up in downtown Burlington, kind of not replacing, but augmenting what Food Not Bombs is doing. What are these folks with People's Kitchen doing?
So People's Kitchen has been around for, I think, since 2012. They were the people who cooked and put out free food during the Occupy movement, and then also in downtown Burlington during COVID. And so they're well known, they've been around, they often provide free food, but I stumbled up onto their table on Tuesday night when I was walking downtown, and I saw the person who's in charge, Fareed, hand-making egg rolls and frying them on the sidewalk, and line of people lining up because People's Kitchen is really known for their really good, tasty food. So it wasn't just unhoused people. A lot of people who know People's Kitchen formed a long line, and they're like, yeah, we are going to eat this food. And so I asked him why, and he said he's heard about all the pushback and negative attention that the Food Not Bombs folks in Burlington recently faced, because for years they used to serve a free lunch out of the Marketplace garage downtown. And then 150 businesses this summer kind of took offense to it, and they said, it's unwelcome, it gets unwelcome attention, it's not good for business. And so they moved the Food Not Bombs, which is a much smaller ad hoc group that also provides free food. They kind of moved to City Hall Park and started doing it there. And then another group of restaurants came together in opposition of the original group to say, no, this is free food, we support them, they're doing a good thing. And the mayor, but this has been hotly debated in Burlington in the city council, and the mayor has basically set aside some money from them, but they are like such a, as an anti-war organization and probably anti-government too, they haven't accepted the money because they said that they are not comfortable taking money from the city, and they didn't explain why. I'm assuming they think it might come with strings.
But briefly, this is all a volunteer effort. I mean, they're supplying the food themselves. They're paying for it themselves, right?
Yeah, they are. It's all volunteer, donated, and often fresh cooked, like People's Kitchen. So People's Kitchen said they heard about this conflict, and they are basically out now in City Hall Park 3 nights a week to augment that effort and to support the Food Not Cops folks. So you'll see them around, and you might want to taste the food too. It's pretty incredible.
Food sounds pretty good. Elodie, very briefly, there's local food efforts in Jericho and Underhill, hooking up neighbors with local farmers.
Yeah, there's a relatively new, it's called the Jericho Underhill Food Hub, and it's all volunteers as well. And started out of a town meeting vote in 2023 in Jericho. Underhill hopped on in 2024. I opened my mailbox, because I live in that community, to this beautiful pamphlet listing like 50 agricultural businesses I can get local food from. And farmers are essentially just saying it's really great to have a group doing the sort of marketing, education, outreach part of which is what they need in order to actually connect what they grow with people who live nearby.
A good reminder that food insecurity isn't limited to the strictly urban areas of Vermont.
No, definitely not. And I want to finish up by mentioning that American ultramarathon runner Tara Dower set a new overall record supporting the fastest known time on the Long Trail Tuesday. She completed that route 3 days, 18 hours, 29 minutes. Wow. It was built between 1910 and 1930, considered the oldest long trail in the U.S., in addition to breaking that record. And she also helped raise over $16,000 for the Green Mountain Club. That's a nonprofit that works to protect and maintain the long trail system. We're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank our panel so much today. You've all been wonderful. Elodie Reed from Vermont Public, Auditi Guha from VTDigger, and Aaron Calvin from Stowe, citizen and reporter. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. I hope you'll join us again next week for Vermont This Week. Thank you all very much for dealing with that. We'll just finish it up there.